You've entered Bookstorm with Kristen Civiletto and me, Chris Storm. This is a podcast devoted to best-selling books that matter, books that make a difference. We're diving down deep with beloved authors about their stories. We're exposing hot-button topics and heartfelt themes, the issues that affect each of us in our own lives, as siblings, parents, partners, friends, as human beings. We're braving new ideas, fresh thoughts, hard lessons, and important truths. Those kinds of things that stay with us long after we turn the last page and close the book. Welcome back to Bookstorm Podcast, and you're going to be very excited about who we have with us here today because this book is the buzz. You've seen it on Book Talk. It's gone viral all summer long. I saw this cover and this cover only. Fourth Wing, and we have the Rebecca Yarros. Welcome, Rebecca.
Hi, thank you for having me.
We're thrilled to have you. And before we get started, I want to tell our readers a little bit about you, some things they might not know. Rebecca is already a USA Today best-selling author, even prior to Fourth Wing. She's been Kirkus Review's Best Book of the Year. She's had several starred reviews from Publishers Weekly. Then out comes, I think it's book number 22, Fourth Wing, instant New York Times bestseller, hit the #1 spot for a good while, very well deserved. And in a few months, the sequel's coming out, November 7th, Iron Flame. We're super excited to have you here. And I love your bio because we read a lot of bios here at Bookstorm, and yours was so very personal and sweet, and I have to share it. She's a military wife for almost 20 years. During her husband's deployment to Iraq and Afghanistan, Rebecca devoured a book a day. And during his third deployment, she finally decided to write her own. There's some good that comes out of that hardship. She has 6 kids. You fostered and adopted your youngest daughter out of the foster system. How wonderful. You're passionate about helping others to do the same. And you have a nonprofit called 1 October.
Mm-hmm.
You're busy navigating the winding road of your daughter's recent autism diagnosis, getting your boys to hockey. You play the guitar. I see this on the side. And you call Colorado your home. And for anyone interested, check out Rebecca's website because you've got some great family photos and photos of you and your husband. And you're just a wonderful family. And you deserve a best-selling book like this. We're very happy for you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Well, Rebecca, we're here to talk about The Fourth Wing, which we are so excited. As Chris mentioned, we just absolutely loved this book. We like to give our listeners a little bit of the backstory of what's going on in the book, and we will not give away any spoilers, but I would love it if you wanted to add anything, of course, at the end.
Sure.
This story is set against the backdrop of a war college in fictional Navarre. We meet 20-year-old Violet Sorrengail. She was supposed to enter what was called the scribe quadrant, and she'd be living a quiet life among the books and history. But now the commanding general, who is also her toughest Helen's mother, I love that little line, has ordered Violet to join the hundreds of candidates who are striving to become the elite of Navarre, and that is a dragon rider. Now, this is a brutal and elite world, as we mentioned, in the war college, and you only leave it one of 2 ways. You either ride or you die. Now, she is smaller than everyone else, and Violet has chronic health issues. And it's concerning because the dragons that we meet bond with their riders, but they don't like to bond with fragile humans, and sometimes they incinerate them. Now, there's fewer dragons in the year when Violet is coming out as a candidate. And there's a concern because if you can eliminate your competition, the other riders, you might have a better chance of success. So she's got a lot of people after her. One of them is, for example, Xaden Ryerson, the most powerful and ruthless wing leader, who may have something against her because of her mother. Now, this is a battle of wits that's going on inside the war college, and she's up to the task. We see it going on between riders, but we also see this battle of wits between some of the dragons and their riders. These dragons are just as much personalities in the story as the human characters, which is, I think, one of the reasons why people just are devouring your book. Now, outside the college, even scarier things are going on. The kingdom's protective wards seem to be failing, and we have a death toll that is rising. And even worse, Violet is beginning to suspect that the leadership has not shared all the information with them, and there are some secrets that may be starting to unfold. Did you want to add anything to that summary?
No, I think you did a great job. That's pretty much it.
And if that doesn't pique your interest, readers, because I read this book and loved it, but as Kristen's giving this summary, I'm realizing how much I loved it and why. It is absolutely fantastic. And I'm going to say, Rebecca, thank you. You transported us to the fantastical, thrilling world of Navarre and enormous flying dragons and places where we can become anything we want to be with a little magic. There's little Violet Sorrengail in all of us. She was frailer, she was weaker on the outside, but she grew into something she was never allowed to be, maybe even by herself. And I had to ask you, I love this quote. She said, I needed to change in order to survive. What part of Violet needed to change? I know she had this chronic illness that I believe I read that you share. If you could expand on that, what needed to change? Do sometimes we just need to believe in ourselves?
So I think for Violet, what really had to change between when she's forced to walk the parapet and when she finally says, hey, I belong in the quadrant, is a belief in herself, but also an acceptance that she can accept the violent parts of herself. And in that, when she first gets there, she has a best friend since childhood, and his immediate concern is to get her out. He doesn't think she'll survive. It's like, you have to get out. You have to get out. And she starts to realize, no, I can survive this. And some things that have to change are, one, pushing her own limitations. We do have the same chronic illness. It's Ehlers-Danlos. And there are certain things, that can help us with Ehlers-Danlos, like strength training or things like that, to kind of stabilize our joints. But for the most part, how our body works is just how our body works. Our collagen, we don't make collagen correctly. We have a fault in our collagen. And there's nothing in the world that's going to change that. So what has to change in Violet is this internal realization that she can do it, and that she can fit in a world that is unbelievably brutal. Because in the scribe quadrant, you're not going to be killed for not making it, right? The worst thing that happens is you get kicked out or you have to pick another major. I always laugh. I hear a lot of people talk about Basgiath and think like Divergent. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like with factions? I'm like, oh, no. It's just a college with 4 majors. That's it. But the writer's quadrant is awful. And if you don't graduate, you die. But every other thing is just a major. So go be a healer, go be that, go, leave the college entirely. But she has to really accept that her life isn't going to be about the books. Because I think when you spend your whole life thinking you're going to be one thing, and then you have that rug ripped from underneath you, sorry, stuttered, you have to make peace with that. And she has to know that not only can she survive it, but she can thrive there.
Mm-hmm. And, I couldn't help when I read this, think that it really, I love, because your protagonist heroine has a weakness. Mm-hmm. And so it really speaks to all people with chronic weakness or illness, anyone with a physical limitation or a need. And do you think a little bit of this gumption or anger that Violet, do you think that people who struggle sometimes get so tired of struggling that they fight harder than the average person? Maybe you reach a point where you're like, I'm tired of this and I want to do something different.
I think I can only speak for myself with chronic illness, and my kids, my 4 boys, all have it too. And it's a genetic condition. Things that are easy for people who don't have a chronic illness are twice as hard on us. We have to always think about what the impact is going to be on our body before we make any decisions. So yes, I do think there's something to be said for being tired of fighting it. For instance, my 18-year-old son who just went to college, of course, he had to go get a tattoo, like the first thing he did, right? Because that's just 18. And he told me, he's like, did you know that the reason we get rashes from the tattoo, like the plastic they put on top of tattoos, is because when we pull the plastic off, our skin is so delicate that it tears the entire first layer off.
Wow.
And I'm like, well, our skin is really fragile and breakable. So we have to just think about that kind of stuff. And so everything we do is a fight necessarily. And in Violet's condition, everything that other kids do, or I say kids, I'm 40, so they're 20, they're adults, but to me, like, they're kids. So everything these 20-year-olds do, she has to work twice as hard for, just to keep her joints in place, just to keep her stable. And I think you do get so tired of fighting, but also I think there's an inner drive you have to have, especially in that environment, to know that you're going to have to fight twice as hard, and that's just going to be how it is.
Thank you for giving all of us that hope.
Violet reminds herself of the continent's history to calm her nerves at different times.
She does.
And I want to talk a little bit about something that she had said about their history. She was reciting, "The continent has been home to two kingdoms, and we've been at war for 400 years." And I was thinking about that because generations of young people in Navarre have grown up with the threat of annihilation, and war is what they know. And most of them have been preparing for that opportunity to defend the kingdom their whole lives. And I was wondering, how has that threat shaped the mindset of these young people? Can they even think about peace when they don't have a reference point?
So I think you would have to ask someone who, like my children, or perhaps any of the Gen Z kids who grew up after September 11th. So my kids were all born after September 11th, and my husband left for Iraq within 5 weeks of my oldest son being born. And so until he retired, they did not know a day that their dad might not go on orders to have to go to Afghanistan. And he went to Afghanistan and Iraq. He was wounded really seriously in his first deployment. And I think it's that kind of question with that generation. That generation doesn't know what it's like, except for recently, once we've gotten out, what it's like to not have a constant war threat, right?
Yeah.
And these kids are raised just the same. Now, we're lucky, like, our generation knows what it is to have peace. They don't. To them, peace is an ideal. Peace is just a lack of fighting. Peace is just a lack of people dying and having to constantly prepare for this war. But it's funny because it'll be explored in later books, but how those civilizations navigate their form of peace is really complex because they don't know what it is. So not everyone has the same idea of what peace is.
Yeah. And first of all, thank you for your family's sacrifice, for your husband's service, and you supporting him. We're very, very appreciative and grateful.
Well, thanks. That's all my husband. Everyone, when they say that to me, I'm like, I'm not the one getting up at 5 a.m. and doing push-ups. That would never happen. I don't say lucky, but I was always well aware that while I was home handling kids, I was not the one being shot at. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. But it's such a necessary component of what he does in his mindset too. And that support and love, I think that's incredible. And so to me, that's worthy of a lot of gratitude as well.
Thank you.
So,
he's pretty great. And he's really pretty. And I like him a lot. So
you're a wonderful family. I love everything about your family. I love the photos on your web too. I want to dive a little bit deeper into this issue of power.
Okay.
Violet's famous warrior sister, Mira, said, "We riders have the kind of power people would kill for." Scale, the dragon, says, "A signet power reflects who you are at the core of your being."
Mm-hmm.
Where did Violet's greatest power lie? In her power to wield, her signet power, which, by the way, we all wish we had one. I loved pretending that. Or was it something more subtle inside of her, like courage?
So I think Violet's strength is twofold, and it transitions during the book and during the series. So her strength to begin with is her wit and her tenacity. She doesn't give up, even when she has every reason to. She gets frustrated, she gets angry, but she doesn't give up. And her wits are really what keep her there, right? When it's not a spoiler, I guess. As she attacks her opponents before matches, she uses her brain. Her brain is her greatest weapon, and she's been trained as a scribe, of course. So naturally, that would be her strength. But then her tenacity and her courage is what gets her dragon. That is the quality right there. It's not the violence. It's not the aptitude as a warrior. It's not, her physical prowess. It is her courage and her wits that earn her dragon. And then as the story changes and her signet develops, because she is bonded such a powerful dragon, her signet is even more powerful. And I think it's Rhiannon says, you know, you'll be the most powerful rider of our generation, not Xaden. And it's a transition between where her power lies in her wits and this new forming power. And that's an ongoing struggle for her in this series is actually, what is my greatest strength? Is it this new developed power, which is utterly, completely violent, or is it still who I am as a person? So it kind of transitions.
You know, it's so interesting how all readers, we in the real world, can relate to these fantasy characters, and we want to be able to get the strength that they do. And maybe, just maybe, that's how we get strength, even with stories, made up stories like this, because these are real characters within that story. And I loved all of that about Violet. And I'm so glad you brought up the dragon. I didn't want to give spoilers, but I love the dragon that she got.
Everyone, I mean, at this point, I think everyone knows it has dragons. He's my favorite character, honestly, without saying who he is. And I based him off my English bulldog, who
Cute.
and my English, yeah, he old man. And he passed before Fourth Wing came out. But he had this like really like curmudgeon-y, get off my lawn energy, you know, like that just old man had it. And he's based off a lot of my dog. And he is definitely my favorite character. I'm so glad I got the chance to write him.
I loved it. Readers, you're going to love it.
Rebecca, there are so many relationships that you really kind of dive into, romantic ones, but there was also one that was intriguing to me, and that is the dynamics of a family. You know, we have a mother and her two daughters, and one daughter is a little bit like her, maybe on the outside.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could just kind of talk a little bit about that dynamic and the fact that maybe they're motivated by something jointly, like maybe patriotism. What do you think?
I think her mother is absolutely motivated by patriotism, and she's a general, which I love. I love that in this world, women are equal to men in every way. They hold the same amount of power, rank structure, things like that. And her mother is commanding general of the college. Mira is her older sister, and she's already battle decorated and like just a very a famous writer. And so Violet doesn't fit in with that dynamic. And I think it spoke a lot. It speaks a lot to if you have siblings. I don't know if you guys have siblings. I have 4 siblings, right? So I'm the baby of 5. And I think watching the different relationships that siblings have with their parents and what is not favoritism, but how do I put this? The different relationship Mira has with her mother, because she is so much like her, because it's easy to earn her mother's respect, because that's how her mother measures respect, as where Violet was more drawn to her father, who was a scribe. And so her respect from him came because she was, you know, witty and smart and capable of becoming one of the next scribes. So they're absolutely motivated by patriotism, but I think there's other motivations that haven't quite come to light yet, and they will in the next books. But I always love a family dynamic. I think family dynamics are so fascinating, because unlike found family, where you choose your friends and they become this family, families like you are just put together, right? And those relationships become exactly what they are, and you could be the most different people, and you don't choose your family.
Yeah.
So I think those are always fascinating dynamics for me to write.
Well, I love too with siblings. You know, I have 4 kids, and I see how each of the siblings has an effect on the other and has, you know, shaped certain things about them, you know, in
Yeah.
good and bad ways, I'm sure. But
Mhm.
all of it is interesting just to see that interaction. And I often wonder who they'd be without their siblings. You know, what is that core person in there? I don't know.
It is. I think you would never know, because we are so shaped. Like, I'm very much shaped by my older sister and my brothers. And I look at my children, because I have 6, right? And I look at my oldest 2 sons are both in college, and one's at art school in New York and one's at business school in LA.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Right? I know. And I
Oh,
look at how their relationship is now that they've left, or how their relationship is in the house, and how, you know, you get youngest child syndrome or middle child syndrome, or,
that's
you
right.
know, and it's all because of how they treat each other and how they protect each other or stand up for each other. And I always have to laugh. My second son has what I call second son energy. So like when my boys were toddlers, the oldest one had his truck taken away, and my second son was only like 2, and he walks up to this kid and grabs it, and he's like, "That's Oz truck," because my oldest kid's name is Aaron. He took it and gave it back to his older brother. And still that dynamic still exists, where he is just the protector of protector of all. And I can't help but wonder how the little ones would have grown up, because they all went to the same school, had they not had that just staunch protective personality where they knew they were covered. And I think that reflects a lot in Mira and Violet, because Violet has never had something that Mira can't protect her from. And even Mira does her best to give her the best shot to get across the parapet, to give her the best advice, to give her the Book of Brennan, everything like that. And I don't know if Violet would have made it without Mira's guidance to begin with. Let's put it that way. So I think we are all shaped by our siblings. We just might not know it.
So
Very
true. Absolutely true. And I also loved Violet's best friend from childhood who wanted to protect her. And as the reader, we're all getting aggravated with him because, we wanted her to just go for it. That was a cool dynamic too with friendship.
I know. And everyone, there's so much, like, I see all the time people like, I hate Dane. And I'm like, and I'm an ultimate Dane apologist, because I think like Xaden is a good, so Dane is a good example of the love you think you want, right? And Xaden is a good example of the love you actually need, like what's actually good for you. And the thing with Dane is when she gets across the parapet, she thinks Dane's going to be who she's known. And Dane has been through the entire first year. And if you look at the growth of Violet between the first day and the last day of the year, she is in no way the same person. And neither is Dane. And she's expecting him to be who he was, and he's expecting her to be who she was before she crossed parapet. And the two just don't mesh. It's kind of like when you guys both go to different colleges and you have different experiences and come back. You can still be friends, but you're not the same. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And little tiny little spoiler that doesn't matter, but readers, there is love in this book. There's romance between people and even dragons. That was cool. So I've got it.
Dragons, not people and dragons.
No, not people.
Important clarification.
I know. There's a huge shift in genres right there.
That's making me laugh. Okay, give us a clue now. I think I heard there's going to be 5 books in this series. Do you have them all plotted out?
I do. I have not necessarily like every chapter plotted yet, but when it was originally going to be 3, and as I wrote Iron Flame, which I wrote before Fourth Wing came out, which was a lot easier to write before Fourth Wing came out, I'll tell you that. I was working on it, and I realized just with the time, like what was happening in the story and everything that's revealed in the first book, how that has to be handled. And I called my editor and said, I think it's actually needs to be 5 books. I think it needs to be split up with this time frame, with this to happen. So this can happen this book, this can happen this book, this and this. And she said, yes. I said, well, just think about it. She's like, no, yes. Like, just think about it, like contemplate it. It's a huge investment for a publisher, right? To change a series from 3 to 5 books. And she's like, nope, absolutely done. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I had to sit down and write out like a 5-book synopsis so that I knew exactly where the series was heading so I could write to it. So yeah, it's all
okay.
plotted.
And you know what the buzz everyone's talking about? We want a movie. We need a film here. Any clue, any word you can give us?
Why don't you guys come back and talk to me after the strike is over?
Okay, we will. And we can't wait for Iron Flame to come out November 7th. But in the meantime, readers, if you haven't read it yet, you better get your copy right away. And before I let Rebecca Yarros leave us, I got to give you a quote. I saw this in your epitaph. Here's to the artists. You hold the power to shape the world. Well, guess what? That's you, Rebecca. And you're shaping the world, and you're telling us an entertaining story, but you're touching hearts. You're giving people motivation and hope. And thank you. We loved it. Loved it.
I'm so glad you loved it. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Oh, listeners, what a fantastic interview with Rebecca Yarros. My goodness. This book, as Chris pointed out, we see so many beautiful relationships explored. And to me, that is one of the things that really stood out here is she's telling a story, but she's just bringing us in where you're immersed in this world. What do you think about that?
I loved it. I loved every single thing of this. I heard the buzz about this. I knew that this was big hype behind this book, and it fulfilled every hope and dream when I finished reading it. And yes, because you can see, we all love a book where we can see a little something of ourselves in there, where we can maybe see ourselves doing something that we don't believe we may have the courage or the strength to do. And when you get a character like Violet, who has a physical weakness, a chronic illness, and you see her overcome and achieve greatness, you just want to root for her. Just brings you so much joy and victory. Just loved it. And let me ask you about this. There was a quote in this book that I can't stop thinking about. The dragon Terran said, "It only takes one generation to change history or even to erase it. One generation to change the text. One generation chooses to teach the new text, and the next generation and the lie becomes history." Wow.
Yeah.
That hit me strong.
Well, that hit me too, because even just thinking about Rebecca's family and her husband's service, that's why you can never forget, because, minds are short. A lifespan is short in the span of history. And we may not remember the incredible work and sacrifice and, you know, diplomacy that was going on, because we carry on with our lives. We get kind of consumed with surviving or working or whatever it is we're doing. And pretty soon, 50 years later, people are forgotten. And so I really love that she explored that in the story, because we have the writers and then we have the scribes, but they had such an important function and we can't forget that.
To be able to, for the next generation to be able to have the power to change history. And you touched on that in your question about that, those people not having known peace, and how she said about people in our generation post 9/11 not having known peace, and that they, however, have the power to rewrite it and bring peace. That's
Yeah.
powerful words right there.
Yeah, I agree.
The other thing that I really loved, and there were so many little quotes in here that were fantastic. The dragon once again says, "Do not wallow in guilt. Allow yourself to feel it, but then let go." Because as Violet is overcoming and taking all these challenges and trying to earn her position in this army, she's looking back and feeling guilt over having not done things or having done things incorrectly, as all of us have. And I thought, wow, what little words of wisdom there. Allow yourself to feel it. Understand that you made a mistake, but then let it go. Do better next time. That was a little
Yeah.
treasure.
Well, I love too in the story that there were times when Violet had to rest, both physically and allow her body to heal, but also mentally, and take a step back and evaluate what had happened, because they were seeing so many terrible things occur around them. And that was such a good reminder, because especially if you're dealing with chronic illness, and even if you're not dealing with chronic illness, allowing your body to repair itself and to rest and have those moments where you allow yourself to feel what's going on, and then you get back to doing what you were doing, I think is so important. And we forget that.
Mhm. We hugely forget that. And isn't that why we love fiction? Because even inside this pretend fantastical story, there are real life gems and treasures and wisdom that we can take with us. And I can't wait for the next book. Pick this one up November 7th. We're going to get Iron Flame. We're going to talk to you all about that book too. And before we leave you, we're going to give you a few storm predictions to pique your interest, because we've got great books coming up. Lisa C. and Lady Tan's Circle of Women, Karma Brown, What Wild Women Want, Patricia Cornwell, Unnatural Death, Tess Gerritsen, Spy Coast, Jenny Colgan, Midnight at the Christmas Bookshop, Jacqueline Mitchard, A Very Inconvenient Scandal, John Mars, The Vacation.
I know. I can't wait to talk about those books. We've read many of them already. We absolutely love, love, love what we've got coming up. And listeners, we continue to grow. We are so thankful. You're spreading the word. You are sharing our social media links, and we really appreciate it. We have listeners now, I think, in 69 countries, Chris, something along those lines, which is so exciting. So we just ask that you continue to tune in to hear what these fantastic authors have to say. You can find us on Instagram, on X, on TikTok, on Facebook, and you can go to YouTube and search for Bookstorm and podcast, and we should come right up. You can see our authors in person there. Until next time, listeners, one of the best ways to brave the storm is to dive down deep into life-changing fiction.